On another topic, approval process going for a spot Bitcoin ETF. I know you're facing a window in early January. What does that look like?
Well, Sarah, we have, I think it's between 8 and a dozen filings. I'm a chair of a commission. I'm not to prejudge anything, so that's going through the process right now. And as you might know, we had in the past denied a number of these applications, but the courts here in the District of Columbia weighed in on that. And so we're taking a new look at this based upon those court rulings.
Market's excited about it. You're referring to the...
So I think, let's be honest, the sort of industry that we're all in is about risk mitigation. So things take time to change because you want to mitigate risk. These programs are multi-year programs regardless. It's very different from just downloading a piece of software onto your phone and going, oh, we've done. It's a lot more than that. There's a complex web of requirements from technology to governance to public policy as well. I kind of look at the technology. I'm a technologist at heart, but I look back at the history of the evolution of technology. And Bitcoin and blockchain is 15 years old. It's still relatively young in the grand scheme of things from a technology perspective. I think the ones that you're starting to see lean in are the ones that can now start to see commercial opportunity with it. And this is why the private sector, I think, is leading the way a lot in that regard. But I look back to the technology that we're using today in traditional finance systems is basically digitized versions of paper ledgers. You've got multiple copies. I think when you start to think about systems design and think about efficiencies, that's where I think a blockchain or a distributed ledger technology starts to become better, because you can all work off the same version of the truth. So if we think about every other market, not just payments, but other financial instruments and infrastructure, there's often copies of data flying around. This starts to reduce that. It creates more efficiency, lowers cost, actually creates more predictability and lowers people's risk because they're all working off the same document essentially. And again, taking a very simplistic look back, I think the current payment systems are very much like email was. It was digitizing messages on faxes. Again, I'm showing my age a little bit here, but digitizing those and sending a letter. You got that, you had to wait for a response. Now you look at the technology now, it's interactive. I can see when somebody's typing, I can see I can see how they're reacting to it. And I think that's kind of the technology that we're talking about now, is that interactivity capability that it also brings, that I think is a differentiator. And we just don't know yet how that's going to actually benefit infrastructure. I'm optimistic. I think this is actually changing the way we all think about financial services in its whole. And if we were designing systems today, this is probably how you design it, but you design within the constraints of what's available at the time.
Yeah. It's like an ESG cartel in this country. So what happens is the largest asset managers in the world, just take the three biggest ones, BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard. They're using $20+ trillion of our money. And when I say our money, it literally means our money, most people's money, without them knowing it. Because these three firms are the largest really relevant shareholders that vote shares at Microsoft and Apple, at Disney and Paramount Pictures, at Pepsi and Coca-Cola. You go down the list, you're taught that you have a free market economy. Well, when both sides of the competition are effectively controlled by the same set of actors, that's not competition. So now back to your question, why are they doing it? BlackRock and State Street and Vanguard are institutions like CalPERS, pension funds, the California State Pension Fund or the New York State Pension Fund. And what those government actors have said, these are government actors now, is to say that we won't let you manage the money of this pension fund, but that you don't get to manage our money as BlackRock unless you adopt these racial and gender ideologies and that you vote shares accordingly. Oh, and that's not just with California's money, unless
Yeah, there's still a lot of work to be done in three areas, I would say. One is hardware. The hardware needs to get better. It needs to have a better experience. I think convergence needs to happen. A lot of these new technologies, whether it's 5G, 6G, IoT, artificial intelligence, you need to take a sum of those and they need to provide value. And the third thing is collaboration. You can't do it alone. There's nothing done alone. It's all an ecosystem play. So work with the partners, what they're good at, what are your strengths, their strengths, combine those. And that's the three things I would work on. So first is, I would say, relentless focus on the customers. Absolutely important. Second is continue to innovate. Don't get upset if things do not work. So continue to innovate. And third is invest in people. Investing in people is the key thing.
On that, memos released late last month revealed that the SEC met with asset managers BlackRock and Grayscale ahead of that much anticipated decision over a potential spot Bitcoin ETF. So I'm wondering, what does that signal to you? And did you have any meetings with the SEC recently on the topic?
Yeah, I mean, we speak with the staff all the time.
And about a spot Bitcoin ETF?
Sometimes, as well as others.
In recent weeks?
Well, I'm not going to really comment on our direct conversations with the staff, but what I will say is this. What the staff is trying to do right now is to make sure that markets function effectively and that all disclosures are in the filings before they launch. And those are two very important functions in the SEC. And I will say that I believe they're moving very quickly. They're being very thorough. There's a lot of speculation on when this will launch. My answer is going to be sometime after January 2nd and when they are ready. And but I think that we'll get there soon.
And it certainly will be very interesting to see what transpires on that front. But
that in the market today, there are commodity-backed stablecoins. So in the absence of regulation by the federal government, the New York Department of Financial Services, for example, has recognized commodity-backed stablecoins. And commodity-backed stablecoins, to be clear, are a little different than what we think of as dollar-denominated stablecoins. So if you had a commodity-backed stablecoin backed by gold, it's stable because the value of it represents 1 ounce of gold. In the case of New York Department of Financial Services, they regulate a commodity-backed stablecoin backed by gold, and they have the entity offering it has physical custody of gold that is audited in conformance with the process laid out by this bill. And so I hope that we can get there. I'm thankful to be working with Mr. Himes for a possible amendment moving forward that would account for commodity-backed stablecoins. As part of our conversation, Mr. Himes has agreed to consider a regulatory regime for certain tokens that are backed by gold to make sure that one token equates to the promised amount of gold from the issuer. These would not be denominated in dollars, but would be redeemable for a fixed amount of the underlying commodity. And we're working on that language because that's a little different than the way that New York DFS has it. We would also allow for these coins to be brought under the state framework of the bill, which is the status quo. And state regulators would oversee the licensing and examination of these coins, just as they do today. Create a term for these coins to adequately capture their characteristics to distinguish them from one-to-one dollar-denominated coins. We would work together going to rules to see if there are space for these tokens in the bill, and these would be transferable in the same manner as the payment stable coins that we are discussing today. I spoke with Mr. Himes about this earlier, and I understand and respect his position that gold, his position is that gold should not be part of the basket of reserves that back what this bill considers one-to-one payment stablecoins. So the distinction would be captured by a phrase, something along the lines of a commodity-backed stablecoin, but the functionality would be the same. Hopefully that clarifies some misunderstandings.
We are funding 1/3 of Ukraine's government. That includes teacher salaries, janitor salaries, everybody's, not just the military. Everybody's salaries are funded by the U.S. taxpayers as the people in our country are deciding between food or medicine.
Right now, people in Ohio can't afford food. Young people can't afford to buy homes. We're paying for their government. You're exactly right. We've got to focus on our own problems. And Laura, the thing that is in our best interest is to get the killing to stop. That's what we should be doing with American leadership, not writing more blank checks to endless war.
Why doesn't he go lecture Europe?
A new paper from the Chicago Fed admits that the American people are right. Things suck. As even regime mouthpiece Reuters put it, quote, the public's downbeat view of the economy is real. Reuters kicks off with a soulful ramble writing, quote, whether it's the collective trauma cited by the APA or the bad vibes noted by internet analysts, there's been a clear break between the U.S. economy's performance and public attitudes about it. Thing is, now the Chicago Fed says the people are right. Paper by Jacob Herbstman and Scott Brave found that the traditional tight link between consumer and small business sentiment and between unemployment rates and wages all broke during COVID, with a plunge in the, quote, average level of optimism in the ensuing years. In short, lockdowns, inflation, and now stagflation have made Americans correctly worry about their future. This is beyond whatever statistical correlations may have been there in the past. To their credit, they identify a big part of that shift, the price level, as in not the year-to-year change in CPI, but what stuff actually costs and how that compares to wages. The fact that prices are so high, up 20% even by official numbers, since Biden first stumbled through the West Wing, means life is now a lot harder than it was just a few years ago. And the fact that it is not getting worse as fast as it was last year isn't making it much better. So kicking the dog less hard does not actually solve the problem. They miss another factor, which is that one of the main economic indicators, the unemployment rate, is currently a mirage thanks to the 5 million Americans who dropped out of the labor force during COVID. Unlike people with actual jobs, people who are living on government benefits or running down their savings do not, in fact, have an optimism for the future. So what's next? Brought to you by Unchained. While media dismisses public malaise over rising prices and falling incomes as mass hallucination, the American people who actually live that reality are desperate. Survey responses find the number of Americans who are stressed about the economy is double what it was under Trump, rising to more than 70% of those below age 44. In recent videos, I've talked about despondent millennials posting videos on TikTok wondering how people survive, and then retiring to their instant ramen with the roommates at an age their parents were already raising a family in a house they owned. As the Fed paper notes, these people are in their most productive period, when they're driven to compete, to work 60-hour work weeks to build the skills that will in turn build up their life savings. If those people are instead stitching together DoorDash gigs with a couple shifts at Starbucks, they are not building anything, least of all a retirement. They will essentially spend their entire life living hand to mouth, never mind providing for a family. These next few years will be critical, both for the economy and for how they respond to it. If the past is a guide, whatever they do to fix it will most likely make it worse.
And the last factor I want to mention is resilience, the capability to bounce back, because there will be certainly what we call the black swans, the unpleasant surprises which will come in our way. So, Minister, dear participants, I wish you a very good meeting